Chris Bowen keeps saying the CSIRO backs up his claim that renewables are better and cheaper and etc, etc. The man we're about to speak to has found giant holes in some of these arguments. How is it possible that Chris Bowen, whoever else, is running around waving this report and saying this thing proves that renewables are cheaper than coal and all the old-fashioned baseload, including nuclear power? How is it possible they can make that claim and the CSIRO can put its logo on it? What are they not telling us?
Yeah. The good news is I think that Chris Bowen won't cite CSIRO's Gen Cost ever again because CSIRO actually put out another explainer statement actually on their website, and I think it was in response to my video because it came just about 8 business days later. And they basically said that all our calculations, the way we did them, where we treated all those pre-2030 investments as a sunk cost, and we didn't include them in the cost, is because we were only considering the costs from a perspective of a new private renewables investor after 2030. So they've basically conceded the point that they weren't trying to add up the cost for consumers. They weren't trying to add up the cost for society and the public at large. They've now conceded the point. They were only trying to figure out what it would cost for an investor to invest in this new technology, given that the consumers had already footed the bill for the major transmission projects and the taxpayers had already footed the bill for Snowy Hydro 2, the major storage project. So I think that Bowen can't go there anymore. I think that it's done and dusted for Gen Cost itself. They've kind of passed the baton now somewhat onto AEMO, but he can't turn around to us and say that it's cheapest because now CSIRO has said perfectly clearly they only said it was cheapest in their eyes for the new investors, and they hadn't tried to add up the system costs that we actually pay in our power bills. So I think it's gone for that one. How he got there and how long CSIRO sort of more or less sat on their hands and didn't mention it when he was more or less abusing their report, I'm surprised by that, and it's really unimpressive. But I think that the CSIRO one is done now. The fight's moved on to the ISP, produced by the energy market operator.
Right, and which is probably based off the backbone of this anyway. The assumptions that were we've jumped off the plank off the back of a report which has been discredited by a man in his computer sitting at home who did a few YouTube clips. And I know you weren't the only one, but that's quite crudely, that's what's happened.
Yep, that's right.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Help me with this, and I know that we're throwing a lot at people right now, and analogies are good ways to compare this. So they want to deal with the solar panel like it's out there and it's just working, and send the cost of energy, of course, is going to be cheaper once it's all set up. Of course, once it's all built, it's going to be cheaper because there's no coal going in it, there's no ongoings. It's just sitting there and it's turning and it's glowing and it's producing energy. Let's move this into some kind of analogy so we can sort of put the spotlight on the bullshit being served up to the public.
The solar out there, that's only a raw input. It's like you saying that I'm going to bake pancakes and I've got the bag of flour, right? It's you need some of the raw energy that's just falling around in the landscape. But getting it to you at the time is like adding a whole bunch of labour to it, and that's what the transmission network has to do. There's a whole bunch of complex engineering to make sure that it has the right sort of inertia, a steady frequency, so that if one thing drops or changes, everything evens out and nobody has surges through their power lines, that sort of thing. So basically, you can think of like the energy that you get on the solar panel. It's like just the cheapest raw ingredient that you put into the dish you're actually going to serve up, but you still have to have extra labour and extra systems added to that to basically make it ready to consume. Like nobody wants to eat raw flour for breakfast, right? So if you want to bake a cake or make some pancakes, sure, but you've got to have some heat, you've got to have a pan, you've got to have all the stuff to make it work, some eggs, some milk, whatever. And so I think this idea that we can just sort of cost the raw, unuseful input and say, well, that bit's cheap, when you're not making the cake, you're not actually making the full thing that you need to consume. It's just silly. It's amazing that it's got this far, and I think a lot of other countries, frankly, have moved past it. There's a much better appreciation around the world for what the total system costs, the full system costs are, and I think that other countries, United States even, have got to the point where they recognise that power that you can rely on, that you can switch on and off, has a very different value to that bit of power that just comes and goes of its own whim. Even if you collect it over a whole year, it's quite a bit, doesn't cost much. If you can't consume it at the second you want it, people elsewhere get that. I'm not sure why we don't.
Yeah, I think you can imagine what my understanding of this would be, but I'll ask you. I mean, is he sinister, or is he just stupid?
Chris Bowen.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think he's trying to make that hard to read. He certainly, I don't know, he's come back very strongly multiple times over after I've pointed out the issues with gen cost, and after I've pointed out the sunk costs, and after it's been conceded even by the chief energy economist at the CSIRO that they did treat those costs as sunk. He has still come out multiple times over and hung his hat on CSIRO, and in particular the AEMO ISP. AEMO put out a press release that says that they include the whole system costs in the ISP, which is just not true. They don't include huge parts of the system, even the most expensive parts of the system. And so he's come out multiple times since it's been pointed out and still written editorials to the Fin Review, to the Australian, basically saying, I trust AEMO. I trust the gen cost and the CSIRO, and it's settled. So he's come back multiple times, even though the facts have been on the table, and I've put things out pretty clearly on Twitter. So I'm surprised that it's still going on. I'd rather not speculate on whether he knows what he's doing and he's trying to run with it, or whether he's just kind of missed the point and hasn't been able to comprehend. I'm not sure for the moment.
You know, it's funny, what you don't say is often what you mean to say, and you haven't said it because we all know it. I guess then we get to this really vexed question, and we spoke about it earlier in the program today, about nuclear power. We have, you know, according to the surveys, more than half the country now thinks this is a good idea. So people aren't stupid. And they see what's happening around the world. And the Bowen answer is, I think it is the most expensive energy option we could put our hands on, or something like that. He uses those turns of phrase. I assume that's all out of this too, is it? The same report, they can make the same assumption?
That's right. That's right, yeah.
With the same thing. So what they're sort of saying, nuclear is really expensive because it costs billions to set up, versus a solar panel that costs nothing because it's from the sun.
That's right, that's right. And there's even more in the Gen Cost report on that too. For example, they estimate that the economic lifetime of a nuclear power plant, which often in the States, for example, they're licensed up to 80 years. He said it's the same as a solar panel, Gen Cost, CSIRO, of 25 years. So there's other outrageous assumptions.
Hang on. Sorry, I've got to jump in on that, because, you know, my father has solar panels on his roof, and we look at them and they're kind of nearing their end. They've been up there for a while and they've got to be replaced.
Yep.
And these people have the hide to say that a nuke plant, which all around the world, some of them have been operating 20, 30, 40 years, that the life of a solar panel is more or less the same. That's one of the assumptions. Again, I think I've forgotten which pages. I think it's around page 70. If you've got the report there, you can look at the tables there. You can read along in your book.
Economic life. Yeah. That's right. But it's all there. So the assumptions that are built into kind of the cost of nuclear energy and renewables in that report are really not worth hanging your hat on. It's nuclear power. Everybody I think acknowledges it's a very expensive estimate in gen cost. It can and should be quite a bit cheaper than that. And that's what is reflected in the power bills of countries that have lots of nuclear power in their system. They don't have the highest bills in the world, they have some of the lowest.
Yeah, and here in silly old Australia, we're jumping off the plank off the basis of, you know, this kind of stuff. I mean, you're a scientist, it must kind of disappoint you that this mob have done this.
It does. It does. I think that they could have been so much better in terms of, the business as usual case, like treating as sunk costs, things that you haven't yet sunk, like you haven't yet built all that transmission, treating it as sunk, I don't know how to defend that really. That's really so unimpressive.